Okay. Well, with the remaining time that we have, we're going to open up to discussion. That includes from the floor, so I'd encourage some people to start approaching the mic. The ground rules are going to be, you can ask questions, you can comment on something you've heard. I'm going to start off a little bit on the IPv6 side, but when you do ask a question, I'd ask that you state your name and your affiliation so we know who you are. And I thought I'd start with a quote. When I was preparing for this panel, I was kind of looking around. I found this quote on this blog post I found called What Comes After IPv6 and DNS, December 9th. It says, and I'll quote it, I'm sure out of context, a true sign that a standard or technology is in its death throes is when governments start advocating the adoption of that technology. Think OSI or more recently NGN. Bill, any thoughts on that comment? Or since you wrote it? Since you wrote it?
I think that's...
Is your mic on by the way?
I think, everybody's very concerned. We've been at IPv6 for such a long time. And maybe we'll turn the corner, but if we don't soon, something is going to have to break or change. And when usually, actually that's a quote I stole from The Economist, and they say when governments start advocating a technology choice, then you really got to start getting being worried about that technology. We've seen that in spades with OSI.
Okay. Anyone else in the panel want to agree or disagree with that comment, perhaps? Or don't jump all over once. Some coffee for the panel, please.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think anybody's really waiting for government regulation to deploy this. People are not deploying V6 because they don't have a good reason to deploy V6. And they haven't had a good reason. And maybe they're starting to get good reasons now to deploy it. And maybe the more forward-thinking ones have looked ahead and decided this is something that's coming and they'd rather be measured rather than panic. But I mean, people in the room can disagree, but I don't think anybody's actually waiting for legislation or any sort of direction to do this.
John?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think we're waiting for government regulation. One thing I was going to point out when I was talking was, so the larger companies, the Hurricane Electrics, the Comcast, the Time Warner Cables, here probably Bell, Videotron, Shaw, Rogers, whatever, those companies pushing the vendors to get these features and functionality in the actual network platforms that it needs to be in, it's actually going to make it a lot easier for the followers to follow on and deploy it, because those features will be there that they need, and they won't have to have gone through the pain of beating up vendors to get it there. And to tell the truth, they probably don't have the clout to get that done. So it really is the people with the clout need to beat up the vendors and get the stuff done that needs to be done.
Okay.
We just have one comment. Industry Canada here, Government Canada has formed an IPv6 task force that you may be aware of. And that's sort of where my comment was directed. When somebody says we're from the government and we're here to help, that's the time to run.
I would agree with that.
Unless there's a grant or something, then it's okay. Right? Let's go to the mic.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. Just one question. Regulation, you don't seem to agree with, but what about incentivization in terms of credits and grants and things like that? Because I haven't seen very much from the government in that regard. Would that help IPv6 deployment?
Yeah, one comment I once heard was routers, cash for clunkers, cash for old routers to upgrade and such like that. Anyone on the grant idea? Has there been anything in the U.S. from that regard, John? I don't think there's anything.
Not that I'm aware of. I know Richard had that idea as well. That they did the thing for the conversion to digital from analog for television and stuff. But as far as IPv6, none that I know of. And Richard's confirming that it's still that way.
Yeah, I would be. If businesses can't find a business case for deploying this, then I think grants and credits are not going to help. I think that's the problem, that we don't have a business case. And so, though I think some parts, universities and research community can help us identify those new opportunities perhaps, and maybe there's a role there working with the business sector to try to find the new business opportunity.
But I asked a question for the panel, in that sense, isn't the business case the continual upgrade of your network? If you held your network at its current size 5 years ago to handle traffic, you'd be dying right now from the Netflix effect and all that. So why is it that providers aren't seeing this as just more of a routine upgrade? Jacques?
Well, when we did our readiness assessment at CIRA, we were surprised that the bulk of the gear we had already supported V6. Some of the security features were not at the level that we wanted, but we didn't have to upgrade all the routers and all the switches and all the servers. Pretty much everything was native, dual stack. It just worked when we did it.
What, Kevin, does that answer your, you look like you have a follow-up?
Yes, no, that was because you were discussing that. My actual question is, I come from the dial-up days. I don't know how many people here come from the dial-up days. And support was dealing with init strings and very complicated manual processes and procedures. There were lots of different systems and it was very complicated. And then we went into the cable and DSL days and things improved as far as support because it either worked or it didn't work and everything was auto-configured or as close to it as we could get. Are we looking with V6 to be going a step back towards the ISPs having to handle more? Or is the goal of what you're seeing to make it as simple for the end user so that it's still the same experience? Or is there going to be the teething that goes on that where a lot of manual intervention, a lot of incompatibilities are going to show up?
So the reason that we're as far as we are down the path to IPv6 is that we did put together a case and convinced our C-level executives that there was going to come a time where we would not be able to grow any farther without V6. So growth was our business case.
Being able to increase your revenue, continue to increase your revenue.
Continue. Of course, recent economic times have made that a hard one to push, but we're still there.
We'll go to Jacques, and one thing I just inquire about from the group, and what I'd love to hear, maybe others, is what are some of the challenges that some of you are facing in your organization to deploying? What is, for technical people, what is, management pushing back? Are you getting pushback? Like, what are some of the challenges you people are having in deploying IPv6? Because we obviously have a group of people here who have had very little trouble on it, so we'd love to hear some of that story. So, Jacques?
I just want to make one comment. I live on the Quebec side from Ottawa, and we use at home. I have Videotron. I'm on the beta program. All I had to do is go on the router, click a little button for V6, and my kids are surfing the internet with V6 today. No, it just worked.
Beautiful, thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next gentleman.
Hi, Aaron Hughes, 6 Connect, and for once I won't bring up IPv6. I have a DNSSEC question. I think an interesting business challenge was identified. I realize that the root is signed and most of the TLVs are signed, but the registrars, generally speaking, there are a ton of them don't accept DS keys. Many of them, most of them don't have APIs. Most of them don't have ways to upload them in a browser. So management is challenging, and we continue to have to work with our registrars to get more helpful tools to upload DS keys. Then I saw a slide on something called DAME, where we can actually take all of their SSL revenue and bring them to the service providers. So it seems to me that it's going to be very challenging to promote getting registrars to help us enable DNSSEC, while at the same time creating a path to take their revenue and send it to the ISPs. How do we promote them to do this?
So not only do we have a business case problem with DNSSEC, we have a negative revenue problem. Joe, maybe did you want to comment that?
Well,
Jacques, on maybe how Sierra's been dealing with that from a registrar, Sam?
Well, there's a couple of people I've heard about, actually, a couple of weeks ago, the ICANN meeting in Senegal. This was NA, Namibia. Dr. Lisa was saying one of the things he's doing, this is a tiny zone in Namibia, it's not a high commerce zone, but he's enthusiastic, and when he's not delivering babies for his day job, he looks after the TLD. So, but one of the things he said to me was one of the ways to do this, in Namibia at least, is to give people a price break if they sign their zones. So if you get a domain and it's unsigned, it costs you X dollars. If you decide to sign it and you upload a DS record, you get a credit or you get a cheaper price. So he's thinking of doing direct financial incentives to have people do this. I mean, it is definitely a problem, but trying to find a registrar, or trying to convince the current registrar to even tell you what their plans are for DNSSEC in some cases. It takes a long time. You don't always get anywhere through that conversation. And you may have, systems already set up dealing with one particular registrar and their particular APIs, and moving to a different one is a huge pain. It's a huge cost in and of itself. So I mean, this is definitely a problem. There's also problems with registrars that also do domain hosting. Like, who holds the keys? Is it the name holder or is it the person who edits the zone? Where do you put the keys? If you change registrars and your old registrar holds the keys, how do you manage to transfer them to a new one and do a rollover? So I mean, there are definitely problems in this area that need to be ironed out. Absolutely. It's not as trivial as I make it sound. I mean, if you happen to be using a registrar that does all this stuff and you never want to change, then it's easy. But for other people, it's not. So there's definitely more work to be done.
But I guess question for you then would be, we're trying to find a business case, and what I hear you kind of laying out is the business case may be offering, revenue incentives, or sorry, not revenue incentives, price breaks. So not only are we not having a business model, we're once again saying that we should take a revenue hit in order to deploy new technology. Is that, must be sitting well with a lot of the CFOs in the audience? And
Looking at a cost saving is one way of looking at it. I suppose another way is that if you assume that not every registrar's customers are happy, and a certain amount of them are going to churn, then if you want to be able to pick up that extra churn of the people who have signed their zones, a proportion that you expect to be increasing, then the way to receive more of that churn is to be able to do DNSSEC yourself. So I think that's a business opportunity. It may be sort of fairly low on the balance sheet right now simply because that population is tiny. But if you look forward to when that population is bigger, then if you don't do DNSSEC, there's a bunch of new customers you just can't get.
Jacques?
So at CERA, I guess the main thing we're going to be working on at CERA is promoting DNSSEC, IPv6. On the IPv6 front, a lot of registrars don't support IPv6 glue records. Although we can take them, customer can put them in with the registrar. DNSSEC is the same thing, submitting the keys and all that. They don't support that, but we don't support it yet also. But next year, our main goal is going to be promoting this, educating people, maybe building a best practice framework how to transfer domains from one DNS operator to another. There's tons of education to do out there, and like we're in the beginning, we need to grow this, learn.
So I'm guessing, based on I see no Canadian ISPs in the line right now, since I'm familiar with both characters, no Canadian ISP is having any problems justifying their deployment of IPv6. This is great news. I know we have some Industry Canada, CRTC people in the folk. Great, case closed, move on. Really? That's it? Nobody? Nobody wants to come up and speak on that regard? That's your incentive. Owen?
Owen DeLong, Hurricane Electric. To the gentleman who said that carriers love carrier-grade NAT, or large-scale NAT, as I prefer to refer to it, because I don't think there's anything carrier-grade about it. I actually think you need to dig a little deeper on that question, because I talk to a lot of carriers, a lot of different conferences and meetings and industry events, and the ones I talk to that are saying, yay, CGN, yeah, it's going to save us, we don't have to do this V6 stuff, it's so much easier to just, put more NAT out there, are the ones that, when you ask them, so how much user acceptance testing and how much experience do you have actually using this carrier-grade NAT technology that you're so happy to purport to be the greatest solution since sliced bread? Answer, well, we haven't started yet. On the other hand, all the ISPs and carriers that I talk to that have actually done testing with carrier-grade NAT are going, we dread that we're going to have to implement this. But we're going to have to implement it. We're going to have to do it for all of these consumer electronic devices that aren't going to support V6. We're going to have to do it to support some of these other things, but we're going to try and get as many of our customers onto V6, and we're going to try and avoid deploying it anywhere we don't absolutely have to. That's what I'm hearing from the carriers that have actually got experience with large-scale NAT. So,
Is the concern interoperability, performance?
the concern is the number of things it breaks. The concern is the number of poor user experiences it creates. The concern is the way it destroys geolocation. Chris Donnelly wrote an excellent paper on this that a lot of people, purport to debunk because it conflates a bunch of different issues. But the reality is, all of those issues that it conflates all apply to every possible deployment of carrier-grade NAT that is likely to occur. And what he's saying is, look, this is the effect this is going to have on the end user experience, and he's right, and it is the effect, and it's not good. And people should look at that before they start touting carrier-grade NAT as such a lovely thing.
So first of all, I agree with everything you say. I don't think it's a lovely thing. I think any technical guy will agree with everything you say. It's the managers who start looking at this stuff and say, hey, anything a carrier that's hard for a carrier, we can make more difficult. And therefore we can charge more and we can lock in our customer. And that's the appeal for it. Vendors, the same thing. So this stuff's going to be so hard, so complex, we can sell a ton of this gear, it's going to cut out competition and so forth. That's the appeal of the stuff. Nobody questions this could be hard, it's going to be tough, but boy, it really then allows us to lock in our customers and charge more.
Yeah, so Owen, every major vendor that we have comes in and they're already pushing their carrier grade NAT blades for their big boxes, and a couple of them, are already, the ZT for one, they're talking about all the networks that they're already deployed in Asia, and they've just, I think, started deploying in Europe. So it's the vendors, absolutely. I mean, we have to try to pull V6 features out of them, but carrier grade NAT, like they're right there, they've got it on their roadmap, they're developing it, they're promising it very soon, the ones that haven't got it already.
So we hear a lot of concerns here about carrier grade NAT performance, it might not work well and all that, but I hear that a lot with IPv6 too. A lot of content providers very hesitant to put quad A records in their DNS. Google, a lot of them turned it on for IPv6 day and then turned it right off. So what, there wasn't a lot of concerns. So what are the concerns? Do we have enough experience now in IPv6 that we can say, yep, it's work, it's just all fear mongering out there, it's a totally mature technology? Go ahead, any of you.
There's the chicken and egg. The content provider are waiting for the ISPs, and the ISPs are waiting for the content providers. There's some of that, I guess. Why not? Google says that 0.00002% of browsers are broken. I don't think that's a real fact or a real problem. Content providers should turn it on, or maybe we just need to build a killer app, just V6, and get it done with that.
I think the other problem with V6 deployment is that because people don't tend to use it much, people don't notice when it's broken. So we've had issues before we've noticed with some of our name servers, some of the name servers that other people run, TLDs and for root servers, where if you look at the V6 statistics, which are usually hidden on a different page somewhere, you see all kinds of graphs covered in red, and it's very easy just to wave your hand at that and say, well, V6 is not very good. So probably these probes just are connected to a broken V6 network. But there's no real good way of having any sort of knowledge of where the brokenness occurs. With V4, you assume that if V4 is broken, customers are probably screaming for some reason or other. Things will either get fixed or the customers will move and the situation will improve. But with V6, we kind of don't know that because people always have the V4 option, which is probably maintained better. So it's one of those, another weird, I suppose, chicken and egg situation where until people start using it a lot, you can't tell how broken it is. And until people actually experience some brokenness, you can't really tell how easy it is to fix and develop all those practices that are not all overlapping with what we do with V4. Some of them are different.
And I agree with that exactly. And that's the problem. V6 is the legacy V4, and this legacy V4 is so huge. You've got all these dual procedures and processes you have to maintain, and V6 usually gets always a short shift on that. And that's why in the Dutch thing we're saying V6 native only, no V4, so we don't run into that problem of forking and feature parity and all those issues we face.
Okay, before we move on, I note there are some CEOs and tech guys from Accelerated Connections, Start.ca, Distributel, Execulink in the room. No IPv6 that I've seen, and there's probably some others. You forced me to start calling you out. I assume that you're all deploying well if we don't hear from you and some of the challenges you're facing. Matt Poundset.
Matt Poundset from Filius. Just to comment on the idea of it being IPv6 being completely robust and ready to go and everything. There are still problems out there. I thought it's very interesting that around the same time that we're running out of IPv4 addresses, we were also running out of autonomous system numbers, and so we had to expand the amount of memory used for the autonomous system numbers. We could double raise that by another power to have the new group available. One of the problems that we ran into doing some of our new network deployments is we had some of these new AS numbers, and one of our router vendors was shipping code where you could not use both the new AS numbers and IPv6 at the same time.
Because why would you want to?
Because why would you want to? So there's lots of stuff out there that works really well, but there are also still a bunch of surprises waiting for people in their V6 deployments, and which is, I think, is one of the reasons why people really need to actually start looking at it seriously and start running labs and start running test deployments and things like that if they haven't already, because there are some incredible little corner case bugs out there that just waiting to catch people.
And later this week, just to let you know also, if you want to get some more hands-on experience, we have Joe Abley is going to be leading a tutorial on IPv6 on Wednesday, and Owen DeLong will be leading... TNSSEC, sorry.
It'll be a short tutorial.
Very And Owen will be leading, along with Blair today, he'll be leading a 2-hour session on IPv6, so I thought I would just point that out. Next gentleman.
Jean-François Mézéhy, vaccination informatique.
Could you get a little closer to the mic? At least I'm having
Okay. Jean-François Mézéhy, vaccination informatique. I have 2 questions because I waited so long. They should be quick. For DNSSEC, you mentioned applications like Chrome that would support validation. Shouldn't the validation be done at the stack level, at the operating system level? And if so, is there movement to get Windows and OS X and Linux to support them?
I haven't heard of anything today at a stack level, in either the free operating systems or the non-free operating systems. I mean, it's attractive to think that that's a good central place to put the stuff. And there are other security-related things, certificate management things generally happens in a sort of operating system context, and applications pull this stuff out. I think the immediate sort of situation is that the browser manufacturers who've decided, well, one, Google, who have decided to actually push this in Chrome into their production releases and actually do something with it, already have a product that doesn't use the operating system stack for DNS. Already does, I think, its own certificate management as part of its cross-platform sort of code stability. So it may just be that because the impetus has come in that particular product, and because the web is a nice visual place where you can indicate that DNSSEC exists, but that's the reason why they didn't do it. But I agree, at some point it would be nice to think that whatever native cache of names and generic name lookup facility you have, which tends to mainly use the DNS, but also uses other things as well, could incorporate these kinds of APIs directly in there. And you can argue that it's a lack of motivation on the part of the operating system vendors, but you can also point a finger at the IETF, because the API that's defined for getting DNS information in and out of the stack doesn't accommodate any of these extra variables. It basically says, here's an answer, or there's no answer. Few return codes. There's no way of saying, I could have got an answer, but I chose not to because it turns out the signature didn't match. Or you can't say, I didn't check that myself, somebody else checked it. All this sort of additional sort of feature-rich stuff that needs to be in the API to make an application and say something sensible to the user is not there right now. So I think maybe that's another reason why you're seeing this in the application first, where you do have complete control of the environment rather than in the operating system.
Second question is about IPv6. If you have a router where you press a button and IPv6 is enabled, what about performance? Does the fact that you enable IPv6 means that its actual performance is halved because you have to have 2 routing tables and then memory and needs to be doubled, or are they really designed to coexist, the 2 of them live at the same time with the same performance?
I'll open the panel, and I know it's probably Mr. DeLong looks like he's itching to respond as well, but maybe John?
Yeah, so it does. Today's your big routers, it's not an issue. They do share resources, and on some platforms, putting V6 on takes away from how many routes you can hold for your V4 and stuff. But for the most part, on the core routers, it's not an issue today.
The one thing we noticed with the firewalls, the older the firewall, they support V6, but the feature set is limited, more limited than the newer firewall that support V6.
So, but towards the edge, does the performance then, if at the core it's not impacted, is the edge routers or even the smaller routers that SMBs would have in their offices, would those actually be impacted in terms of performance once you enable them?
Don't have a full routing table in those devices.
True.
It's very hard.
I mean, the impact of your Linksys might be you need 2 default routes now instead of 1.
Yeah.
So,
I've heard a lot, though, John, maybe you can comment that there is concern, at least at the core. Maybe we've talked a lot about the edge. Is there still concerns in the core with the routing table size? And if this thing, obviously there's a limited number of routes right now, or not as many, but if this thing takes off, this new thing, do we have concerns in that regard? Do providers in the room have potentially looking like they might have to upgrade cost if they're kind of on the edge? And Owen clearly would like to comment too, I can see, but start with Mr. Sweeting.
So I would imagine with some platforms that are still out there, there probably is, but for the most part, like I said, the products that have been coming out for the core over the last 2 to 3 years, they've been upgraded, and today there's plenty of room for a lot of growth. I guess if the V4 table were to be totally fragmented and V6, I guess there could probably be, but Owen's kind of looking at me like maybe not, so I'll let Owen speak on that.
Owen, do you have some comments on the CPU core?
As somebody who actually works for a rather large network that does a lot of IPv6, as it turns out. We don't see it as an issue. There's 10 plus prefixes per autonomous system average in the v4 table. In the v6 world, that's somewhere between 2 and 3 per autonomous system. So fully scaled out, you've got a v4 routing table that's rapidly approaching 400,000 prefixes and continuing to grow at an alarming rate. And you've got a v6 table that is currently around 8,000 prefixes, and fully scaled out would be somewhere between 35 and 50,000 prefixes. So really, even fully scaled out, the v6 routing table is a drop in the bucket next to the v4 routing table, and I wouldn't worry too much about it. In terms of performance, we actually see v4 perform better through most routers because it's easier to forward we see v6 perform better in most routers by a very, very narrow margin because the v6 header is simpler to parse in hardware, and so it actually reduces the latency just a little bit.
Thank you, Owen. So we'll move on a second here. One thing I asked a colleague of mine earlier, if you could just take a quick peek and see what kind of routes we see. What is the Canadian uptake? And there's only about 17 organizations, Canadian organizations in the IPv6 side. Yet I've already mentioned a few ISPs. I'll add Eagle.ca, Colbanet, ILAP I think I saw. I know there's some people from Bell, Telus, and Cogeco, so if everything's so great, how come we don't either see more, more activity from you guys, or hearing what some of the concerns are, because that's what we're trying to do. So as we enter the last 15 minutes, I'd ask, and I know we have a lot of the major guys in here also, so we'd love to hear that. Sir?
I think I can give a little bit of an ISP perspective. I'm Chris Allen with ABC Communications. We're about a 5,000 customer ISP in BC, and I think I can give a little ISP perspective on it. And I think really the main thing that I think a lot of us are just waiting for is the big carriers to jump first. We need the Teluses and the Bells and the Rogers and the Shaws to get on board, make IPv6 what they're doing.
From a transit standpoint, or from the
just from out to the last mile to their end users, make that the norm, and then that becomes a lot easier for us to adopt it instead of the smaller players having to be the ones that innovate, replace their routing equipment, do these sorts of things that I think are real. There's no financial incentive right now. We're also not growing fast enough that our IP pools are rapidly depleting. So there's really, from our point of view, we've looked at IPv6. We kind of know what we would have to do to make it happen, but there's no financial reason, and really I'm expecting TELUS or somebody to actually do something first, and then, okay, well now we'll move ahead and we'll start doing this. So I think those guys are going to need some kind of lobbying pressure to make their moves first before you're going to see the smaller players going forth and doing that too.
All right, any of the majors in the room, of course, to come up and discuss, but maybe we'll just go, since finally my call to action has been heeded, we'll just hear from the next two, and then let the panel kind of discuss.
Adrian from Accelerated Connections.
Thank you.
I would just like to add what the previous person said as well. We're an ISP in Canada here. We're providing customers with business DSL, high speeds, line extensions, whatever. We have deployed IPv6 on our network, but not to our customers yet. So one of the reasons that you may wonder why we haven't really deployed to our customers, and it comes down to a business case. Number one, we don't have a business case currently today. A customer hasn't come to us and hasn't requested we want an IPv6 enabled network or something to that extent. There's also vendor adoption. We do have some CPs, legacy CPs as you would call it, on our network that potentially do not support IPv6, and this is towards the customer side, not so much towards the core. I do agree that a lot of the core equipment is already IPv6 ready and runs dual stack, and everything's working fine, but going to the CPE side, that's where you're going to have challenges running IPv6, and most of the people that do run IPv6 now, and you mentioned TechSavvy at the beginning, I'm sure it's all on a Linux platform, some sort of operating system that's more intelligent, whereas a router such as Motorola router or whatever, you have to have the vendor involved to deploy those feature sets on the router. The other thing that I would like to point out is that there are, I would say, and maybe I'm wrong and you can correct me, limited case studies out there for IPv6 deployments that one could just do a search on the internet, for example, come up with the case studies, take it internally, analyze them, and see how they can apply it to their own business. So we're learning from the big customers, from the big carriers who have deployed this already. So case studies are really, really important. I know at the beginning there were some mentions in the slide about DNSSEC. how case studies are going to be part of the website and everything else. So that's really, really important, I think, in IPv6 as well. And of course, with smaller ISPs, it's training as well. So you have to pass all that training on to everybody, and it takes time. So just want to add those two comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just take the next speaker and then we'll go back to the panel because it's...
Joseph Bassini Colbadet, since you mentioned my name, here
Yes,
I
thank
am.
you for being blackmailed.
Okay, Paul, as you know, I'm not technical, very technical, but my technical people did make a test on IPv6. I understand that it's possible to make a test, and it was successful. But from what my technical people say is that there are some maybe websites that will not reply to IPv6, or then there is apparently a software that has to translate from IPv4 to IPv6, etc. This is the reason I think we need a push, and I think that if, for example, the Internet Society would take one ISP at a time by the hand, I don't know how expensive that would be, and go through the hurdles, because consultants are not always perfectly knowledgeable, and then if they're afraid of pitfalls, they say IPv6 is only a year down the road. This is what I heard.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Because that's some of the feedback that Richard and his team is looking for, because that's the event. So I heard a lot of stuff in that thing. I heard about training issues, translations, case studies. Maybe we start there. Any comments? Is that some of the? And you know, Joe, I'd ask you because I know that you, in your former life, were involved in actually bringing a small.
In my current part-time.
Small and medium-sized ISP and bringing IPv6 to their network, and was it all Linux boxes and software hacks, or were you able to?
No, I mean, this is interesting because I think there's a lot of fear involved in this stuff. And as it turns out, the smaller the ISP, really the smaller the hassle it is to turn the stuff on. I mean, if you're small, you're more likely to be consistent in your infrastructure. You don't have a lot of stuff spread all over the place. Probably don't have a lot of vendors. Probably don't have many routers. So, I mean, the couple that I've had experience with in the last couple of years, one of which Paul knows very well, we turned on V6 in your network. I think it took an afternoon.
Yes.
And I may have been drinking.
It's a consistent theme here.
It really wasn't that hard. I mean, I understand the concern with, you know, you throw this new thing down the pipe towards a residential user, and if their 5-year-old Linux isn't going to understand it, what's going to happen? But, I mean, you solve this by looking at, well, you solve it by testing, but you also solve it by looking at the protocol. I mean, if the device at the end, which is trying to set up a PPP session, doesn't ask for V6, then nothing V6 related comes back down the pipe. All they get is exactly what they get today. It doesn't matter whether V6 is supported on the head end or not. What you see at the end on the LNS, all you see at the end is the same thing as you had before, V4 only. So the transition is actually relatively smooth. And I think one of the things that the gaps in these kinds of things, people keep talking about moving to V6. And Jacques had a slide about this. This is not a transition. This is an addition of a new thing. So you might have the pressure of saying we're running out of V4 addresses, so therefore we need to do V6. But that leaves you in a situation where you do V6 and you're still running out of V4 addresses. And you still need V4 addresses. So you haven't really solved the problem. You've mitigated it in some sense in the long term. But the immediate problem of running out of V4 is still there, so you haven't solved it. So it's not really a good business pressure to try and tell you to spend money on doing everything. So I think, you know, there are some big ISPs for whom carrier grade NAT was not an example, not an option. Comcast is the poster child of this, where there's not enough addresses in RFC 1918 to number their customers. So they had a different sort of problem. They couldn't just do a very big central NAT for everything. They needed to split it up somehow. And they've gone down the road of looking at transition mechanisms where the NAT is pushed out to the edge, to the customer, and then the intermediate transport is V6. So I mean, there's transition mechanisms here, but I hear a lot of people talking about a transition to V6, which I think is a fiction, and at least in our lifetimes. And I think the other thing that's missing is is any meaningful discussion on how do you actually manage the run out of V4 nicely, and is V6 part of that equation or not? It's not obvious from just hearing the transition rhetoric that's really even an answer there.
And Jacques, what do you say to, and maybe John, the big guys are moving? Because I know when Sierra was deploying, they had to speak to a lot of the big vendors and such like that. Are they really doing nothing? Is it just it's taking them a bit longer? You know.
You mean the vendors?
No, the comment I think Chris made was that the Bells, the Teluses of the world, they aren't making any movement, so you know it's hard for us to move without them, which I think Joe mentioned a bit. We don't necessarily need them, but
I've talked to a couple of ISPs when we did our assessment, readiness assessment. A lot of ISPs actually had V6 kind of working in beta. They're waiting. They're not sure. But when we had the date and we said we want it on this date, they actually made it work. They said the provisioning system's not perfect, this and that, but they got it to work. So we're running on V6 on Canadian ISPs, beta, but
So was Google Maps for like 5 years, but you know.
but you know, it's why not do it for everybody? Why not turn it on? Why not go more? The small ISPs that said is waiting for Roger and Telus. Don't wait, because we're going to be running V4 and V6 for the next 25 years, at least. So we're going to be in a dual stack environment with these two protocols forever. And the sooner you start V6, the more you know about it, and then the date that the killer app comes out on V6 only, and all the kids want to go to that site and you're IPv6 ready, you're going to get the market. So it's going to happen. That's a fact.
John, did you want to add anything, or?
Yeah, I guess, so our main concern at Time Warner Cable is to make sure that the first customer that we have no IPv4 address left for, and we have to give them an IPv6 address, that they have the exact same experience and services that their next door neighbor that has like an IPv4 address has. So that's what we're working towards, and you know, it's going to be, we're going to have IPv4, IPv6, it's going to be there, it's going to coexist for, as Jacques said, quite some time, 25 years, but I don't think it's a stretch.
Oh, so, and the last point that I heard, or one of the last points I heard, and I threw it up, hey, nobody is asking for it, you know, building it, but nobody's coming. How have you guys overcome that challenge, or is that really the challenge, or?
I think that's, you have to create the markets, yeah. For anybody with legacy systems, it's V6, there's still some challenges, we've heard that. I think, and that's why I think, you know, going after the, you know, how would you like to have unlimited data, no charge, for your iPhone? Will that make you move to IPv6? I think that would be a proper incentive. You pay for it by selling off your V4 addresses. That's what we're doing in the Netherlands.
Okay. Any of the other panel want to jump in on that one, or just leave it right there on that one? Seeing no appetite, let's go back to the mic. We're going to be closing the mics very shortly because we're going to have our first break soon. I'm being given a bit of the hook here, so if you want to ask a question, please line up very shortly. Otherwise, go ahead, sir, identify yourself.
Hi, Jose Robles from Terrago Networks. I just wanted to give our experience with rolling out with IPv6.
Okay.
We started earlier this year, actually a year ago in December, with just doing all of the Torx IPv6 and Seattle Internet Exchange IPv6 peers. So over the past year, we've been turning them up without any issues. We have our entire backbone basically ready, and we were actually kind of surprised that all of our gear did support it. The problem that we're having right now is actually on the edge, and we discovered that all of our edge routers unfortunately do not support IPv6 natively. So we're in the stages now of going to the SLT, the CEO, and say, hey, we need a lot of money to basically upgrade all of our edge routers that our customers connect into. I am very scared about carrier grade NAT. I agree, I don't like it as a solution. At the Cisco Networkers back in May, there was even one presentation where they don't even recommend doing carrier grade NAT if you have enterprise-like customers because of the double NAT situation. But our plans right now for the first phase is just to do dual stack. And then as we take on customers, we'll see whether we will have to go to carrier grade NAT boxes afterwards, or if we can live with just the dual stack nature on the network.
And what was some of the feedback your management gave when you came and said we have to spend a ton of cash for non-revenue opportunity?
It got slashed in half.
Did you at least double it before you went in?
Almost, but we realized that if asking for all the money, we did the number crunching and said, we don't have the manpower to replace all of the routers in 1 year anyways.
Right.
So we're okay with okay, let's spread it out over 2 years. But in 2 years, we're going to have to make a decision about the IPv4 only customers or the ones who are stuck with only IPv6, where there's no translation capability that's going to be on our network. Potential.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that feedback. I don't know if anyone wanted to add into that, or just that's a great feedback. Jacques, go ahead.
I just had when we did our readiness assessment with all of the ISPs, the one ISP came back and said, it's going to cost you more to have V6 when you're transit. And that was a big, no. If you buy an internet circuit, the internet is V4, then it's V6. It's not just one or the other, and you don't charge extra for a protocol.
I agree, and of our upstream transit providers, all the Canadian ones don't have IPv6 capability yet. But surprisingly, one of the US-based ones did, and they gave it to us for free.
One of them is like 2 inches away from you, in fact.
Yeah.
Kevin, last comment, and we'll go for one
Kevin,
last
you were
down the
lawyer.
line. Just
I think, Paul, one of the questions, or the polling questions that might have been more interesting is how many ISPs or how many people in the room have IPv6 on the core? Because that is the first step.
Well, I asked who's touching it all, but sure.
Right.
We can ask Brent, who has IPv6 on the core?
Because that is the big issue, is that there isn't demand right now from our customers asking us for IPv6. Why? Because there is no financial incentive and there's no application that demands IPv6 today. With IPv4 runout, suddenly there's going to be a price of gas scenario where that V8 of IPv4 is going to cost you a lot more money to run because there's going to be exhaustion. And when you get into a supply and demand scenario with V4, at some point, it's going to be more expensive, so the consumer will have to decide, I'll use V6 because it's cheaper, or I will keep on V4 even though it's more expensive. And that's where I guess the 25 years comes in, is as the exhaustion gets worse and worse and worse, that will happen. Is financial a consideration for adoption?
John, did that ever come into your factor when you guys did your business case, or is it really just that we can't grow?
Well, of course, but you know, there's the whole other thing, like your routers get replaced so often. So our business case was around spreading it out. It wasn't 1 year. We actually spread it out over 5 years to do the refresh of all the hardware. The main thing was to make sure that we stopped buying anything that wasn't V6 supporting at that point, because then it'd be like another 10 years before you could replace that. So it's very, I would say it's pretty critical to stop purchasing anything. If it doesn't support V6 today, you shouldn't be buying those products. That would be,
I'm more concerned about the customer, not the core. I think all of the ISPs in this room are looking at, I'm not going to buy a piece of equipment unless it supports V6. I'm wasting my money if I do. But there's no reason for a customer today to use V6. Correct?
Correct. And that's what I'm saying. It's like you're not gonna have that revenue to do it. So you've got to use other things like your technology refresh in order to get the equipment into your network on the edge that supports it. But you can't be out there. A lot of people out there still purchasing equipment that doesn't support V6 and won't support V6, and that's just not a good thing to do.
Particularly in the enterprise.
Yeah.
You go into the Fortune 500 company data centers, there's so much gear, so many databases don't support V6. That's going to be a long time before that happens.
I think in general, if we're in a situation where we have to wait for customers to ask for V6 before it's worth deploying it, then it's not going to get deployed. Because customers don't know about V6, customers don't know about V4, they know about Facebook, and they know about eBay, and they know about downloaded illegal music. And that's the first thing they know. At a certain age, a teenager, they might be interested in other things. But I mean, we can't expect any of these customers to actually ask for V6 at all. It's not going to happen. So I mean, I guess what it boils down to is how do you continue to provide customers what they want, using whatever mechanisms available.
So
and you've got to assume that V6 at some point is going to become part of that package, just because V4 has a shelf life.
So we're going to have to leave it at that. With this thing, I'm going to ask each panelist, maybe we'll just go down this way time, just a final closing thought of any inspiration for our crowd that you might have got from today, or leave it with. John?
Yeah, so, like Joe said, that a lot of it is the technology refresh for cable companies, going from DOCSIS 2.0 to DOCSIS 3.0. V6 is part of DOCSIS 3.0, but there's also the enhanced speeds and the load balancing and the bundling of upstream, downstream. I mean, there's a ton of other features that we get with that. So that was the financial business case was for those features. But I've heard a few people mention today that, yeah, you just turn it on and it works, and I would just like to say that goes to the people, the early adopters and the people that have been out there beating the bush and pushing V6 for the last 10 years. It wasn't, it didn't just happen. The vendors were pushed hard, and the features are there today, and we just have to continue. Like I said, the bigger players need to continue pushing the vendors to get those features there, so when the other guys go out there and buy the equipment and turn it on, it just works.
Okay, thank you. Bill, quickly.
Yeah, I think the issue is that for the end user, particularly the consumer, there's no benefit from moving to V6 or DNSSEC. So you have to bundle it in with some other application or service that then, so it's a benefit to the ISP or whoever. And so finding some sort of market strategy that, so you can say here, customer benefits but doesn't realize even getting V6, I think is the most important. And that's what we got to find. I've been talking about. Jacques.
The internet is evolving, and it's now V4 and V6. So don't wait. If you can do it, do it.
Joe, the final thought?
Well, the final thought I think for me is we've heard a lot about V6, but we haven't heard enough about how easy and sensible it is to do DNSSEC.
And they should.
So I would encourage people who haven't played with it to play with it, and people who host domains, find out whether your current software allows you to turn it on in a simple way and give it a try, because it's not difficult, and the possible benefits from having a global PKI that's managed the same way as DNS, I think are high.
Okay, if we could just take a moment and thank our panelists here in the summit we just... Joe, don't drink all in one place. So thank you all very much for your participation. I think it's been a great debate. Thank you again to the ISOC team for giving me this opportunity to have the lectern for a little bit. We are right now have, I believe, a coffee break outside, which will end very shortly. So